up a little bit. We're going to start over. So thank you everybody chatting now. Okay, so let's start over just because there were some important things there. And let me go ahead and just delete this guy. So love technical difficulties. Okay, starting over. I was at a trade show and we were actually, we had a mini factory set up where we were making these little sensors, and they actually sense the air quality. There's a little fan that sucks air in and calculates. You can kind of see it's kind of blue right now. If it was really bad, it would be very red. So it figures out if there's smoke, if there's pollen, dust, etc. in the air. Well, as we were manufacturing these things, one of the very first steps we had to do was with this plastic part, we had to put some screws in here. And in fact, there's 3 of them. So let me go ahead and just do this really quick. But you'll notice when we turn them over, the screws fall out, and it made it really difficult to try and assemble this thing. So Jonathan, who actually designed this whole thing, one of my coworkers, came up with a really cool solution where he just modeled a quick thing that we could 3D print that actually just clicks over the, let me just go ahead and do this really quick. Clicks over it, just kind of clicks in place, and now it holds the screws as we assemble the rest of the components, like the CNC machined enclosure. There's a circuit board, etc. On the inside. So I'm going to show you how you can go about creating what I would call an in-context design. We're going to use information from this white part to help create this jig right here. Okay? So let's dive right in. Got to set everything down. So here is, let me just kind of turn a bunch of this stuff on. So we're basically going to create this little jig that you see holding it in place, and you can see that it's actually kind of registered by an opening here on this where the USB port is. So I'm going to go ahead and turn off the shell. You can see there's the circuit board, and I don't have all the parts in here like the screws and the fan or anything like that. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this off, and this is the part we're going to be working with. And like I mentioned before, we're going to create an in-context design. We're going to use information from this model to help us design our jig. So the first thing I want to do is to create a new component. So I'm going to go ahead and click on New Component, and let's just give it a name. I'm just going to call it Jig. Say OK, and I now have a new component called Jig. And the reason I wanted to use a component is 1, it simplifies my timeline. That's the main reason. And 2, we've got multiple parts. We're probably going to assemble them together, so they need to be components. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is just create a sketch. And it's kind of hard to see because of the grid or whatever, but I'm basically just hovering over one of these faces. I'm just going to go ahead and select the bottom face of this, it's called a bottom plate, basically. Now you'll see that some of it is kind of shaded in and some of it is not. And that's because Fusion auto projects for me. So you can see it actually like projected a lot of these profiles. Now the bad news is, there's some embossed text in here, so it actually got projected also. And I don't want all of that information, so the first thing I'm going to do is actually say delete and just draw a box around everything like so. And I'm just going to delete that automatic projection, and you'll notice now there's no shaded areas, which is this show profile. What I want to do is capture information, for example, where these holes are and what size they are. So we're going to project onto our sketch. So under Create, Project, or you could use the P key for the shortcut key. Okay, wow. I apologize, guys. I am having some major technical difficulties. Just a second. again, it's not correct. So give me a few moments, guys. I apologize. What is going on? I can see my cursor on the shared screen. Bear with me. I'm going to stop sharing and then try it again. So if I lose you, I apologize. Try coming back into the stream really. Okay. Okay. It looks like we were back. Let me make sure this is rotating on your screen. Okay. Wow. Not my day. I apologize, everyone. So the last thing you saw, let's see, okay, we're back. Yep, thank you everybody for chatting and stuff like that. I'm not sure where I lost everybody, so I'm going to again back up just a little bit. All I did was create a new component. In fact, I'll go ahead and do that. Let me just undo a couple steps. Okay, so created a new component, and then, okay, I'm just looking at my chat to make sure people can hear me and they can see. I thank you everybody for responding. I appreciate it. Okay, so I created a new component, and then I'm going to come in here and say create a sketch. And I'm just going to select on one of these flat faces on the bottom of the part. Now you'll notice that it kind of highlighted some of it with kind of this orange or tan color, and that's this show profile option right here. Now what it did is whenever you create a sketch and click on a face, it actually auto projects for you, which is kind of a nice time-saving thing. But in this case, you know, I've got some embossed text, etc., that I don't really want all that information. So I'm going to come in and come in here and say delete, and let's just draw a box around all of this like so. And I'm just going to go ahead and delete all of that projected geometry. Now you'll notice we don't see that tan profile stuff anymore, because I want to be very specific where I'm projecting stuff. Now I want to project very specific things such as the size and the location of these circles. Okay, so I'm going to go under the Create menu, Project, and then I'm going to select, for example, these 3 circles, and you can see how it's projecting those circles. I also want to grab maybe this this inside circle, like so. Oops. For the size, and then probably this outside circle for the size also. And when I say OK, I'm going to go ahead and turn off this bottom plate so you can see what happened. So I projected just the stuff that I needed. I wanted to know exactly the size and the location of these circles. Now you'll notice, unfortunately, because there was a kind of like a hole or an indentation right here, this outside circle doesn't go all the way around. But there's a neat little trick I'm going to do here. I'm just going to select that edge, and let's just turn it into a construction line. So I'm going to click on construction, and we can see how it's dashed. But now when I come in here and say create a circle, I can grab this guy and this guy right here. Okay, so I see that somebody said we didn't get to see how you created the new component, so I'll review that here in just a second. But what I did there is I basically just turned it to a light pencil line, and then I came back and traced over it with an object, with a circle. And now you can see how this whole area is shaded, which means that it's a valid profile. Okay. Now the next thing I want to do is to add some extra material, so I'm going to use the offset command. So right up here is offset. I'll click on this edge, and let's just offset this let's just go maybe like 3 millimeters in this case. And I'm done. Okay, so I'll stop my sketch. We can go ahead and turn this bottom plate back on so you can kind of see what we did there. So there's our sketch sitting on the bottom of that part. And then I'm just going to come in here and select what I want. Right mouse click, and again, remember when you right mouse click, it shows you the commands that make sense. So we're going to use the extrude command. I'll start to drag, and let's just go maybe 3 millimeters in this case also. I'll say OK, and there is my part. So we can see that sure enough, the holes line up with the this bottom plate. It's sitting on that bottom plate, and so we're basically using the information from this other component to help us with our design, and we're going to keep doing that here. Okay, so somebody mentioned, how did you create that component? Again, under the Assemble menu, I just said New Component, and I gave it a name of Jig. And then it shows up over here, it's activated, and that's why this other one's kind of ghosted out. So I highly recommend creating components, because notice my timeline is very simple right now. I have a sketch and I have an extrude. Okay? So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to create these little tabs that go around the part. And let me go ahead and snap this back on really quick, just so we can kind of show what it's going to look like. So we can see how it basically clips onto the edge of this white part right there. And there's 3 of them. There's 1, 2, and there's another one down here. So we're going to create that part next. I'll go ahead and turn off the bottom plate. And I get asked this question a lot. I want to put a plane that cuts through this part. So let's go ahead and turn on the origin. But you'll see that the origin is actually way out here in space somewhere. It's nowhere near this component. So how do I go about getting a plane that's going to cut through here? Well, we're going to use this construction menu. So in here, there is axis through a cylinder. Now, the reason I'm doing an axis is because I actually want to create a plane at an angle. And you'll notice the little tip that comes up. It says, creates a construction plane through an edge or through an axis or a line. Okay? So it doesn't say anything about a cylindrical face or anything like that. However, this allows you to create an axis through a cylinder. So we're going to say axis through a cylinder. I'll click on this face, and you'll see a little tiny line up here. That's basically the axis, the center of the cylindrical face. Now here's a neat little tip. If I just click and drag on the top of that line or on the bottom of that line, I can actually extend the size or the length of that axis. Okay, so even though it was kind of short, you can always come back and recreate it, or extend it. So now we can come in and do plane at an angle. So I'm going to say plane at an angle. And it's asking for a line. So I'm just going to get near this new axis and click on it. And here's what you see. It created a plane that goes through that axis. Now, unfortunately, it's in the wrong direction, but I can grab this and start to rotate. Let's just come over 90 degrees, and now the plane is kind of cutting through exactly where I want it to. I could also be very specific. I could say make it minus 45 degrees or whatever. You can be very specific. You can drag it or you can type it in. So I'm going to say 90 degrees and say OK. Now, just like we did with the axis, I can actually grab the corner of my plane and change the size of it if I need to. Okay, so not a lot of people know about that, but you just grab the corner and drag it around and you can kind of change the size of the plane. Okay, let's go ahead and turn our bottom plate back on because we're going to reference this. And I'm going to pre-select this plane and say, let's create a sketch on that plane. So we're now looking straight at it. We're basically slicing through the middle of our part, but we're looking right at the side of it. So I want to capture some information from this part so that it'll fit. So again, we're going to use the project command, or the P key. So P for project. And you'll notice, because this is like a curved surface, there's really not an edge there, but it is showing kind of the most tangential point. So I'm just going to go ahead and click on this area right here, and it just projected that surface onto our sketch. Okay, I'll go ahead and say OK, and you can see these dots that appeared. So it basically projected this surface. Now I can use that to my advantage. So I'm just going to go ahead and start sketching with the line command, and you'll see how it snaps to this endpoint. So I'm going to go ahead and click there. I'll go ahead and click there, and then I'll come straight down like so. And then maybe I'll come over a little bit. So I'll come over to here, and I'm going to use these snap guides to my advantage. I get near that dot, you can kind of see that dashed line, so I'm just going to go ahead and click there. And what this is saying is I'm at the same height as that other dot. It's kind of that dashed line is showing me I'm in line with that other dot. So I'm going to go ahead and click there. Now I want this to be the same angle as that other line, but you'll notice as I'm moving around, nothing's really happening. It's trying to snap to midpoints and all that kind of stuff, but it's at the wrong angle. Well, all I have to do is just hover over this line for about half a second, and it's going to reference that. So now you can see it's showing me that those lines are parallel with each other. So I can come down to right about here, and we can see that those two lines are parallel, and I'm lined up with the midpoint. So I'm just going to go ahead and click and click. Okay, so let's zoom up here just a little bit. This constraint here is showing that it's parallel with this line over here. Okay, and then this triangle means that this line snapped to the midpoint there. So I was able to use the information from this part to kind of help me create my sketch. And I'm going to keep it pretty simple like this. I'll go ahead and say stop my sketch. Okay, let's go ahead and turn off the bottom plate right now. And I want this to kind of follow this curve, so I'm going to use the Revolve command. So I'll say Revolve. What's the profile? Well, this is the profile. What's the axis? Well, I can click on a cylinder or an edge, doesn't really matter, so I'll click on a cylinder. Now, it's wanting to go all the way around, but in this case, we're going to do an angle, and let's go symmetric, and let's just maybe go, let's just say 10 degrees in this case. So I'm telling it to go 10 degrees to the left and 10 degrees to the right. Okay, so it's symmetric. It's going equal in both directions. If I just said one side, it's only going to go 10 degrees on one side. Okay, and we also see that it says join, so it's actually going to join this tab to our existing plate, which is what we want to do. So I'll go ahead and say OK, and we just created a little register that's going to, kind of slide up and snap onto this bottom plate. Okay, now I want to do this in two other locations, but we're going to use the power of Fusion to kind of save some time. So I want to create, let me go ahead and switch the camera back on here really quick. I want to create these little tiny grooves in here to give these tabs some flexibility to be able to move up and down. So you can kind of see these little grooves, okay? So we're going to create that next. So we'll click on this top face, right mouse click, and say Create Sketch. Now, again, I want to use information from my model to help me with my design. So I'm going to project, so P for project. Let's just go ahead and project this surface right here. I'll say OK. And if we turn off the jig here, you can see that it projected that surface. Now we'll use that to our advantage. So I'm just going to go ahead and create a line that's in line with that. And so you can kind of see how it's keeping in line, and I can specify the distance. So it looks like around 7 millimeters looks pretty good. So I'm going to type in 7. Okay. I'll do the same thing over here. I'll do a line. It goes like so. And let's just go maybe 7 millimeters in this case. And then I want to offset that. So I'm going to hit O for offset. And let's just bring this over, let's just do maybe 2 millimeters in this case. Oops, I'll do the same thing here. I'll repeat my offset, drag it to the right, and let's just go 2 millimeters. So we're basically starting to design this little groove area. Now, obviously it's not closed, so I'll come in here and use my line command to maybe close that there. And I'll close this here. Okay. Now the issue is, you'll notice it doesn't go all the way to the edge. So we can come under Modify and say Extend. And if I get near this edge right here, you'll see it kind of turn red. Let me kind of zoom up. So it's actually going to extend this line to the next profile. So I'll click there. Okay. And I'll do the same thing over here. So I'm just going to extend these lines so it goes to this next profile. And now I'm done. I'll go ahead and stop my sketch. Now, I'm not dimensioning a whole bunch of stuff. This is more just to kind of machine some stuff away. I did tell it I wanted it to be 7 millimeters. I could come in here and specify distances, but in this case, I'm going to leave it blue. So I'll say stop my sketch. But you'll see that I now have some regions that I can use. So I'm going to select that guy there. And that guy there. I'll say extrude. And here's another trick I like to show. I'm going to go ahead and start to drag down. And I could snap to this bottom face right here. So you can kind of see it says snap to -3. Well, I also could say, instead of going a distance, go through all. And so you can see it's going to go through all. Now, why would I use this? Well, there might be situations where you might come back and change the thickness of this thing. And if you pull down this bottom face and it knows it only needs to go 3, but you told it to give it, a thickness of 6, it's only going to machine 3 millimeters. But by setting this to all, it doesn't matter how thick this becomes. It always has to go all the way through. So I'm going to switch that to all and say OK. And we've now created those little grooves. Now, if you've watched any of my other live streams, you've heard me say quite often, keep your sketches simple. And so I didn't add little fillets in my sketch. I basically just did 2 rectangular shapes and extruded them. Now I'm going to come in and add my fillets in 3D. So I'll come in here, right click and say fillet. Let's just make that 1. I'll grab that edge there, and we can see that sure enough it blended those edges. So I'll do the same thing over here. I can even pick through my model, and I've blended those edges. I'll say OK. And there is our little recess tab. Now I want to have this pattern around, so we're going to go into Create Pattern, Circular Pattern. Now you'll notice by default it says Faces. Now I could probably draw a box around all of these faces and pattern them around, but I like to use features. Because we're capturing these features in our timeline, let's go ahead and select features. And here's where it gets really, really powerful. I can come in here and say, I want that revolve, I want that extrude, and I want those fillets. So you see I've selected those three things. What's the axis? I can pick either this vertical line or I can pick the cylinder. It really doesn't matter. I'll go ahead and pick on the actual axis. And we want a quantity of 3. You can kind of see the little preview it gives us. I'll say OK. And boom, instantly, we now have the 3 tabs that go around. And of course, the phone rings. It's one of those days. Let's see. I want to turn on the bottom plate here, and we can see how it's now being kind of entrapped by these 3 tabs. Okay. So the next thing, actually I should leave that on. The next thing we want to do is create kind of a register. So we want it to basically clip into this little USB opening of the shell. That way we know we're aligned correctly. It kind of holds it in place. So again, we're going to use information from this other part. In this case, it's called shell. We're going to use that to help us with our design. So I'm going to go ahead and reuse this construction plane. We'll go ahead and sketch on it. And I want to project some information from this part. So P for project. And I'm going to rotate so we can kind of see a little bit better. And I can kind of see the bottom and the top of this opening here. So I'm going to hover over that face, and you'll notice it kind of just creates a line. And that's because it's, you know, the plane is kind of cutting through there. So it's basically projecting this surface onto our plane. So I'm going to click there. I'll do the same thing here. I'll click on that face there. So I now know the overall height and pretty much the location of where this opening is. I also want to project maybe the overall distance, how wide this thing is. So we're going to use that as reference. And then I might even grab some of the parts off of my existing parts. I'm going to grab a couple faces there. Say OK. And it projected all of this information for me. So now why did I do this? Well, now I'm going to create a sketch, and you'll see kind of the power behind this. So I'm just going to go ahead and grab a couple of these dots. But I also want to be in line with this. So I'm going to hover over that, and you can see how it's snap guiding. See that little blue line? It means I'm perfectly in line with that. So I'm going to come up. Let me zoom over just a little bit, and I can see now I'm perfectly in line with the edge of this part. So I'm going to click there. I'll come down a little bit, and maybe I want to be in line with this surface there. So I'm just going to come straight over and straight down like so. Okay. Then I'll come over something like this. And in this case, you'll notice it's not wanting to snap perfectly horizontal. So I'm going to purposely make it at a slight angle like so. And then continue my drawing here. So I'm just going to draw a quick sketch kind of to the left a little bit. We'll come up here, line up with this guy. So I'll just come over, again, using those snap guides to my advantage. And then finally, I'm going to close like so, and we should see that fill in, okay? Now, I know that was like kind of a lot going on there, but basically we're referencing this part right here. And you can kind of see the opening right there. So we're grabbing information from this to allow us to sketch to the other part. And if I zoom out now, you can kind of see the part that we've created. Now, there's some mistakes, there's some issues, so I'm going to go ahead and fix that. So I'll select this edge and then right mouse click, and it shows me the constraints that make sense. In this case, I want to force it to be horizontal. So you can see how, sure enough, that forced it to be horizontal. I also want, let's specify a particular dimension here. So let's see what this guy, let's make that 3. And I want to make this guy 3 also. So neat little trick. You place your dimension. You can click on an existing dimension, and it's going to reference that. So now you can see this says 3. What's neat about that is if I were to change this to be, 5, that's going to update to be 5 also. So really kind of a neat way to make thicknesses stay the same, for example, in this case. Okay, so again, keeping my sketch very simple, I'll go ahead and stop my sketch. I'll click on my profile, right mouse click, it shows me the command that makes sense. So I'm going to say extrude. Now how far do I want to extrude? Well, I'm not 100% sure. I could do some measuring, all that kind of stuff, but basically I want it to come out to this edge right here. And you'll notice as I get near this edge, it says snap to. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that. And we can kind of see, now it's red because it thinks it's cutting into some material, but we obviously don't want to cut, we want to join. So you can see how it extruded the exact distance I wanted it to. I didn't have to take any measurements or anything. So that's a neat little tip. I also want it to be symmetric, so it's going to extrude in both directions. I'll go ahead and say OK. And we've now added this, basically this feature to the rest of our jig. Now you'll notice I kept things pretty simple, boxes and stuff like that, because I want to kind of use this information. Now I could, I'll show you two methods here. I could come in and subtract. So let's come in here and say combine. What's the target? This is the target here. What's the tool? This is the tool here. And we want to keep the tool and we want to cut. Okay, so watch what happens here. It's basically going to take this big cylinder and cut that shape out of this blue part. So when I go ahead and say OK, so I'll turn this shell off really quick, you can kind of see what it did. Okay, now this is kind of cool. However, it's not exactly what I want. And I'd have to do a lot of work in here. I'd have to come in and say maybe like delete those faces and stuff like that all the way around, which would work. There's nothing wrong with that, but you'll notice there's a lot of little extra features and stuff like that. So since this is just for basically for aligning and kind of keeping things registered, I want a little bit of slop. I want a little bit of slack. So I'm going to just basically visualize. So let's just click on this edge and say fillet. Let's just kind of look at it from the side here. I'm just going to start to drag this down a little bit until we can see that we have some clearance going on. So, in fact, if I look at it straight from the back, we can see that we have some clearance. And I could maybe change the size of this or whatever. So it looks like around 2.5. So I'm going to type in 2.5. And I'll zoom back out again real quick and do the other 4 edges in this manner. So I'm going to select that edge there, and finally this edge here. Okay, so that was much faster. It gave me the results that I was looking for. I basically just kind of want this shape. So I could have used the combine cut, but that would have taken a lot more time. Now, with this guy, we measured right from the very, very top of this shell. And again, I want to give it a little bit of clearance. So I could just click on that face and say press pull and start to drag down. And you'll see that we're going to give it some clearance here. Okay. Now I don't want to give it too much. So let's just say minus 0.2 in this case. And there you can kind of see it gives us a little bit of a gap. Okay, and then I'm going to do the same thing on this bottom face right here. And so you'll see it shrink up. So I don't know, I'll try not to move my mouse. Notice how they both are moving at the same time. Okay, so we just gave it a little bit of clearance there. Okay, this is starting to look really good. Now I can come in and think about how is this going to be manufactured. Okay, now I showed earlier that this is going to be 3D printed. And I probably want to create some kind of bends here. I don't want sharp edges on my model because I want it to be able to flex a little bit. You know, maybe I could print it with sharp edges. Maybe we want to soften the edges a little bit. So now I'm going to come back and say, let's add some of the details into it. Excuse me. So let's go ahead and turn off the shell real quick. And maybe even this bottom plate will turn off. I want to put a fillet in here. And probably around 3 looks pretty good. So we'll say 3. And I'll even do maybe that edge there also. Okay, now here is something really interesting. As I was adding that fillet, I noticed on this little lip or this rib right here, there's some weird extra lines that, oops, and I can't even get that very close. Some extra lines in there that I don't see why that would be in there. Okay, well, that probably happened even before we did the pattern. So let's take a look at maybe what this sketch was. So I'm going to go ahead and take a look at this sketch and zoom way up. And you'll notice that unfortunately there's a little indentation right here, okay, where it kind of overlaps. Maybe this is where the body touched it or something like that. So I can see there's this little indentation. And when I did the revolve, I probably, whoops, again, didn't include that as part of my revolve. Okay, so this happens in the real world where you get way down in your timeline and you realize many, many steps ago you made a mistake. And yes, I make lots of mistakes, so I will be the first to admit it. So how are we going to fix this? Do we have to start all over? No, absolutely not. I could try adding that sketch back in there, but I'm going to show you some neat tips and tricks with this. So I'm going to jump back in my timeline before we do the pattern. Okay, so I'm going to drag this in front of the pattern. So now I'm just working on this guy here. And I'm just going to right mouse click and say delete. And let's just draw a box around, oops, wrong selection. Let me change my selection to like a window. So I'll say delete, kind of just draw a box around this like so. Say OK. And instantly it removed that problem area. Okay, really quick fix. But watch what happens when I come into my pattern. We can see that that still exists in my pattern. So why is that? Well, think about when we created this pattern, we told it which features we wanted to pattern. So for example, if I say edit, you can see that it wanted to pattern the revolve, the extrude, and the fillet, but it doesn't include the delete. In fact, right now you'll see it says 3 objects. Well, check this out. I'm just going to add in that delete. Now it says 4 objects selected. And when I say OK, it's fixed on the other tabs. Okay, hopefully that made sense. When we did the pattern the first time, we said pattern the extrude and the fillet, for example. But this time we said pattern the extrude, the fillet, and the delete feature. And so it deleted it over here also. So hopefully you saw how quickly we were able to fix that issue. Instead of messing with sketches and trying to figure out which edges and faces, etc., we just deleted them really quick, really easy. Okay, so I'll jump to the end of my timeline. We see we got our little arm there, which is good. And now let's say I want to put a little maybe a soft fillet on all of the edges. So I'm going to come in here and let me just do a selection window. Actually, no, I lied. Let's do the fillet command first. I'm going to say fillet. And I'm just going to draw a box around the whole thing. Okay. Now there's some edges I don't want filleted, so I'm going to unselect, for example, these little circular edges here. Top and bottom. I don't want those. And let's do a pretty small fillet. Let's just say 0.5. Now, as I'm sitting here, it's taking some time, and you'll notice I get an error message. Okay? Filleted chamfer could not be created where edges meet at a corner. Now, you would think this would have worked, because this is pretty simple part, but for whatever reason, it failed. And you'll notice it says 132 edges were selected. Now, it said it failed where edges meet at a corner. And if I kind of look here, I can kind of see there's an edge here, an edge there, an edge there, an edge there. I'm guessing this is probably where it's going to fail, because everything else is nice and, you know, perfect, right? So we got 3 edges in a corner, 3 edges in a corner, 3 edges in a corner, etc., etc. But here we've got the 4 kind of going on. And so I'm guessing this is where the problem is. So I'm going to unselect. So notice this says 132. I'll go ahead and unselect it. Now it says 131. And then I'll select this guy here. And instantly you can see how that updated. Okay. So sure enough, it was that corner that was causing the problem. Okay. I see I might have to add some in the bottom, but that's okay. So here I was able to draw a selection box around the whole thing. Yes, I got an error message, but then I was able to come back and just unselect the 2 edges I didn't want. And instead of doing it in multiple fillets, I'm able to do it all in one. So I'll go ahead and say okay, and we've filleted all of those edges. Now the last thing I want to do is maybe I want to chamfer. And again, I need to figure out why that didn't go all the way around, but I'll figure that out later. I'm going to click on this edge here and say chamfer. Let's just try maybe 2 millimeters, 2 millimeters on all of these guys and say okay. We'll turn our bottom plate back on, and there is our design. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and save. You know, made new jig or something like that. Okay. And then I might come in and say, okay, why did this not fillet all the way along here? So I'll just go ahead and try creating a fillet. Let's just say 0.5. And if it can, it will, and if it can't, it won't, kind of a thing. So yeah, so I'm going to have to interrogate why that didn't go all the way around. That is kind of odd, but I could fix that pretty quickly and pretty easily, but I won't take the time here to do that. But you'll run into situations like this where, for whatever reason, it didn't go all the way around. Okay, so now that I have my part, I want to 3D print it. And I've seen this topic quite often, and, you know, how do you design for 3D printing? And hopefully you saw here, again, with all the technical difficulties, I apologize. If it had gone smoothly, I probably could have created this part in under 10 minutes, right? I'm using existing geometry. I'm using all of this white part stuff to help me design where these holes go, what the size is, what the offset is. I'm lined up with the side of the part here and all that kind of stuff. Now I can say, let's print. So all I have to do is come under Tools, in this case, and say Make. So it's asking for a selection. I'll go ahead and select that object. And it's going to analyze it. And you can see that it breaks it down into a bunch of little triangles. This is your stereolithography. It tells me I've got about 14,000. I can also refine this. I could say I want this to be really high quality. So I'm going to change it from 14,000 medium to a higher quality, and you're going to see it's going to take longer, but now it's at 34,000, almost 35,000 for high quality. So if you have some, tight tolerances, you might want to specify your refinement to be high. You also have the ability to specify your options here. I usually leave this stuff alone, but you can see you can do surface deviation and normal deviation, but I'll leave that alone for now. And then this output. Right here it says send to 3D print utility. So I could send it, for example, to Mesh Mixer, Print Studio. I use Cura, so you can see Cura shows up. So it's going to push it right to my Cura. So I'm going to say Cura. And then I could also not have this checked, and it will send it basically just to an STL file. So if I turn this guy off and say OK, it's just going to create an STL that I could then put on a flash drive or whatever and get it to my machine. But I'm going to go ahead and do Cura. Say OK, and it might take a couple moments for this to happen. So you can see now it's starting the Cura, and again, it takes a while on my machine. So, but you can see basically we went from a design, an idea in our head, to an actual object, sending it to our 3D printer. Again, I apologize how long this is taking. And I can hit print and print it out. In fact, while this is loading, there we go. You can kind of see there's the part inside of Cura. Okay, so as a matter of fact, I printed this guy this morning on my 3D printer as reference. So designed it in Fusion and then hit 3D print. So again, I apologize for some of the technical difficulties we had. Hopefully you found this beneficial using what I call in-context design. I love the fact that I can use existing geometry to help me with my new design, for example, for the jig or whatever I'm making. Instead of having to write down dimensions or create a drawing of something and then recreate another part, we're using the existing geometry. So again, thank you for your time. Make sure you subscribe. Thumbs up, thumbs down. I appreciate all of the comments that you guys are putting in the chat window, out on the Facebook group. I'm going to continue doing these live streams. Again, I apologize for being gone for a couple weeks, but look forward to another one this Thursday, and I hope to see you then. Thank you.